Hi, I'm Laura Pennington, and I work specifically with freelancers like graphic designers, virtual assistants, web developers, and writers who want to grow their businesses more quickly and effectively. One of the most common questions that I get from the new and emerging virtual assistants that I work with is how they can offer the most value to their clients. If you're new to the virtual assistant world, you probably have questions about what your client is looking for and how you can go above and beyond to build a long-term relationship with them. It's actually a lot easier than you think to serve your clients. Step number one is to go above and beyond what they ask for. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to provide hours and hours of work beyond what you're being paid for, but think about the next step that you could accomplish in the project, or think about questions they might have after reviewing your work. Doing this simple step shows that you really care and that you're committed to their business. Make sure you do the research on each project. If the instructions aren't clear, or if you don't feel like you have everything you need in order to accomplish something, it's better to know that up front and then to tell your client, hey, I'm missing pieces here and I need some more details, or I need a piece of software to accomplish this. It's way better to acknowledge this at the beginning of a project as opposed to when the client is expecting you to turn in completed work and you haven't started because of a stumbling block. This sounds obvious, but it does need to be said. Deliver what you say you will. And that really puts you in the driver's seat, because if a client asks you when you can complete something, this simply means you need to be honest about when you can complete it by. So you can explain to them some of the limitations on your side and how the schedule may work for you, but just stick true to what you say you're going to deliver. If you say you're going to do something in a week and it's the 6th day and now you're emailing the client for further instructions, that shows you haven't really taken this seriously. So deliver what you say you will, and if you can't do it, share that. Make sure you complete project goals with their business in mind, not yours. This means that you're thinking about what their company could use or what their life could use if you're a virtual assistant who's sort of working as a personal VA to an entrepreneur or an individual. What are their business goals in mind? Think about who they're working with. Who are their clients? What are the challenges your own client faces on a regular basis? Whatever you do to try to address this can be really helpful, and the client will instantly see you as a major asset because you're thinking about their bottom line and their end goals rather than perhaps your individual ones. It's really hard to part ways with a VA who you feel is so committed to your company because it just builds that trust and loyalty. Remember that it's not about completing a project as quickly as possible. If you're working on something where you're being paid by project, it's very tempting to think, let me wrap this up as soon as I can so that I can get paid. But if you miss things or show sloppy work, the client's not going to want to work with you beyond this project. They might even terminate an ongoing business relationship you have. So it's not about completing things as quickly as possible. It's about doing them right. Being one step ahead of your client shows that you're so committed to their business and their own success. I can't recommend this strongly enough. Think about the challenges that your client might be facing. So for example, if you got a task from your client that said, I need help determining what webinar software to use, you could conduct the research and put together a spreadsheet and then think about what questions they'd still have about reading that information when you provide it to them, and perhaps pointing them to some additional articles for the top 1 or 2 pieces of software you recommend is a really great way to anticipate their concerns and be one step ahead of what they need. This is so valuable when a virtual assistant provides this to their client. Again, it should go without saying, but admit when you've made a mistake. Everybody makes them, and your client will make them too. The more you can be humble about it and say, you know what, I didn't handle this as professionally as possible. I didn't deliver on time. There was a communication mishap here. Your client will respect that you're being honest unless it's an egregious error. So be open to saying, hey, I made a mistake, or I'm sorry, I just couldn't get to this. More often than not, your clients are going to understand as long as it's not a behavior you're going to repeat over and over. Just be honest about it. The same goes for if you realize you're not going to meet a deadline where you promised the client. Just communicate if you're going to miss a deadline. If you notice that the time to turn something in is drawing near and you're not going to be done, send them a message. If something personal happens in your life and it's going to hold you back from completing the task, let them know. I would always rather know that something's going on rather than expect something and realize that you've dropped off the face of the earth. And I think this is true of most clients that you're going to work with as a virtual assistant. You're not always going to be perfect. I've already stressed that. So own up to what you can do better. And sometimes that means being honest about what the client can do better. There's always room for improvement. And when you're solution focused instead of problem focused, the client will still see you as an asset. Approach everything with a neutral tone and suggest what you could do better in the future, as well as what the client could do to help you. When you frame solving problems in the perception that this is all going to make your client's life and business easier, they're going to be more receptive to hearing it, especially if you're saying what you think you could do better as well. If you don't have the right amount of instructions from your client, don't be afraid to ask for help. Sometimes instructions are the biggest issue in a relationship between a VA and a client because the instructions are really bad. They're just not written well, or it's not exactly clear. I give specific instructions to my virtual assistants, and to all of the entrepreneurs that I work with in the hiring process, I instruct them about the value of giving clear directions, because a VA can feel overwhelmed. A VA can actually feel stupid and unmotivated if the instructions are really bad. So where there's room for improvement there, tell the client how you best like to receive instruction. Do screen capture videos help? Do you need written instructions? Do you need to walk through this with them as they do it? Make sure that you provide the opportunity to make this be a learning experience for both of you. And don't be afraid to ask. Again, it's way better to get additional information so that you can turn something in right the first time. If a project seems totally impossible, share concerns with your client. Don't be afraid to say, I'm sorry, I need more information here, or I've attempted to start phase 1 of this project, but it looks like it's not going to be possible. You'll notice that a lot of these themes keep coming back to communication, keeping that open line of communication and saying, hey, there's a problem here. Here's how I suggest we fix it. When you share concerns about a project that seems overly difficult or even impossible, explain why and tell your client how you came to the conclusion that you did. More often than not, they'll be happy that you took the time to be honest about it and try to come up with another task or another way of approaching this issue. Part of the reason for talking about projects that are impossible is that your client needs to know limits. When you first hire a virtual assistant and you give them 10 tasks and they succeed at all of them, it's very easy to fall into the trap as a client of thinking, wow, this virtual assistant can do everything. You know, there's no limit to his or her ability to accomplish these tasks. But every so often you will be given a task, or your client will give you a task that just doesn't make a lot of sense and you can't really accomplish it. And then you feel really handicapped when you can't do that. So your client needs to know your limits. And again, if this is something where you require additional information or education, suggest how the two of you could accomplish that together. Some of these limitations can be broken down. For example, if you were given a task to do some HTML coding and you're really only a basic person with that, you only know a little bit about it. If it's something that interests you and you want to help your client with it, share an online course that you found to teach you more about it so you can learn better. I have invested in courses for my own virtual assistants because I really wanted them to be knowledgeable about how the process works and how to get the most out of something. And ultimately, those investments have paid off as they become experts, or at least really knowledgeable in something. And my final thought is that success is all about consistency when you're working with virtual assistant clients. Be in open communication with your clients. Share concerns when they emerge. Point out what you can do better. Make sure you always have crystal clear instructions and be one step ahead of your client. If you implement these thoughts into your practices as a virtual assistant today, there's no doubt that you'll be working with some amazing and some thrilled clients.